How are you guys? So I thought, just now that John's got you all fired up and everybody's having a good time, I thought I'd kill it all by giving you guys a quiz. So what I want to do, dive through, I was kind of talking to Simon a little bit about, oh man, the journey of cloud. How do you go through what's happened in the last 5 years in 10 minutes, right? 2 minutes a year? That's a little tough. So what I thought I'd do is spend a little bit of time kind of stepping through what some of that history is and giving you a chance to think about when did all this stuff happen and really get a sense of how compressed the time frame for cloud really is. So first of all, why would Simon say, so the first thing I would point out is I'm the author of a blog called The Wisdom of Clouds. My personal journey with cloud computing began, I came from an application development background. I was looking for something to do that was not Sun Microsystems. And I was thinking, I had worked at Forte Software. They had an amazing developer experience in terms of deployment of code. So I wanted to get something out of that got me back in that direction, got me back into that experience a little bit. And when I saw a company called Cassat, which was about basically automated utility computing deployment into a resource pool, I thought, wow, that was the next step. The next step was to allow the application and the components to automatically make decisions about how much resources they need and to take care of that stuff. So I went to work for a company called Cassat, started a blog at that time. And when was that? That was August of 2006. Now, this was utility computing at the time, and I'm going to go through that. I'm going to show you when the term cloud actually even showed up in my lexicon. But the core concepts here of this ability for you to auto-scale in a resource pool definitely predate the cloud, and were actually being implemented in some enterprises under a different term, under a different usage, in very much earlier before this August 2006 date. I began, really the first point at which I used the term cloud. Anybody want to guess? So in 2006, I started blogging about utility computing. Anybody want to guess when it was that I first used the term cloud in a post? Do you think, put your hand, okay, George. Oh, no, that's not fair. So how many think it was in 2006? How many think 2007? There's a couple. How many 2008? All right. You guys are really close. 2007. December of 2007. Now, this is what's really fascinating. So we had a huge amount of debate and discussion about utility computing. Simon Wardley and I, the reason we got to know each other so well is Simon and I and John and several other people were beginning to have this discussion about, wow, what happens when you have these free and open resource pools? What happens to applications? What happens to application deployment in that space? And there are a couple other things I'll talk about that to convince it. Now, at what point in time do you think the cloud meme in general really took off? 2007. Good. 2008. Really? 2009. Interesting. All right. This event and the two conferences that went either side of it was the point where I would make an argument that the huge burst in the cloud hype really started to happen. So this event was the first cloud camp in the United States, and the conferences before and after were Velocity and Structure. And that was the week of June 24th, 2008. Something magical happened at this point in time, and you can actually see it if you look at the Google Trends. There's a little bit of a takeoff there, kind of 2007 to the summer of 2008. There's a lot more of us that are in tech beginning to think about, what is this concept of cloud computing, this idea of actually being able to get these services. You're going to see part of the reason why that started taking off in 2007 very soon. But the real launch, so you can see an uptrend from the middle of 2008, very strong uptrend at that point in time. And in part what happened is through Twitter, through blogging, and through a variety of announcements that happened around that time frame, all of a sudden there was some real meat to this cloud computing story. All right. So SaaS is considered part of cloud. So SaaS is kind of this weird kind of thing where you look at it and you go, well, You know, that's actually got a longer lifespan than cloud. Anybody remember when Salesforce.com launched? What year? So the launch party, February 22nd, 2000. So the interesting thing about Salesforce.com is what they did was, rather than think about elasticity in the traditional sense that we all think about it at that time, rather than think about it in terms of on-demand resource allocation, they really thought about it in terms of being able to quickly and easily get a CRM account for any number of people and be able to kind of negotiate that with them and so on. So, but rightfully, they had multi-tenancy built into their product from the ground up as early as 2000. So again, not a new concept. Does anybody remember when S3 showed up? 2006, what time frame of the year? Spring 2006. So spring of 2006, all of a sudden we have a storage on-demand service offered by, out of the blue, a bookseller. Now, part of the reason that all this hype happened is that Amazon was not the place you would expect to see an IT service coming from, but boy, did they have the experience to run it. Anybody remember when EC2 launched? August 2006. Good yell. August of 2006, now there was compute capability. Remember I told you that kind of 2007, you could see from that trends graph that cloud really kind of started to take off. EC2 they didn't really use the term cloud. I can't remember what they described themselves as, but I guess Elastic Cloud, so they used the term cloud, but it really didn't, it was totally out of, very different concept, and it was a concept that really didn't catch a hold with a lot of people in those first couple of years. Although, it was a game changer. So this is the point to me where, from a computing perspective, from an infrastructure as a service perspective, those two announcements from Amazon really were big game changers. Now, try to think of who were the other early guys in the infrastructure as a service space. So I said, I remember GoGrid being really early. And I remember Rackspace being really. So they must be right around that time frame. Oh, all of my little graphs that blocked out the dates are gone, so you can even see the date on this one. So I'm not even going to quiz on it. 2008, spring of 2008, we start to see other infrastructure as a service providers. I think that's fascinating because in a lot of ways, it took a really long time for even the hosting industry, which should have recognized what was going on right away, to really recognize things and begin to turn out services. Rackspace, 2008. Now, PaaS is an interesting story. First platform as a service offering other than the good old Zimke. Was that 2005, 2004? Built 2006 was the launch date, okay? And then it went away. Now, there were some other small players in this space, but the real big engine didn't come out until April of 2008. I find, for this one, I think it just shows how in the baby steps of PaaS we really are. Because another major player in this space had their launch in 2009. Again, just last year, Heroku has this big launch. Engine Yard was maybe a little bit before that, but not that too far from time frame. So these are things we take for granted today. We have debates where we use these guys as foundational examples of what it is that it means to be PaaS. These are year-old services, 2-year-old services. We don't know ultimately what's going to really win. And to the standards debate point, we got a long way to go. Did I go backwards? Oh, I got them in twice. All right. One more. Little discovery of a little company out there called Eucalyptus, the first real kind of open source story that really hit home for a lot of folks. First open source cloud infrastructure as a service play. Does anybody remember when that showed up? Martin, you ought to know this off the top of your head, man.
March 2008. Around
June 2008. So June of 2008. And I think this is the open source story. I mean, let's look at the other big announcement. Well, I shouldn't say the other. There's some great open source projects out there. The one we just heard about, obviously yesterday or the day before, was the Rackspace announcement. Open source of the cloud, and I'm going to talk about this in my session tomorrow at 10:45 or whenever it is. Open source of the cloud is incredibly nascent. It's just very much at the very, very beginnings. We kind of are anxious to see the end result. We're anxious to see these solid products that are built on standards without a lot of lock-in, have hybrid cloud capability ready to go. And I can tell you, being kind of in the grunt work of what it's going to take from an infrastructure perspective, that we have a ways to wait for that. And I think that's what I got.